Jagdish, Sheth. Welcome to MIS, and we are most honored to have you here today for this interview session. We would like to ask you some questions for you to share with us your thoughts, your insights, and your philosophies, and everything that you feel could help us. We have some questions here. May I start with the first question? Consumers' need for diverse products has resulted in product life cycles becoming highly volatile and unpredictable over the years. What concepts in marketing will assist marketing community to accurately predict life cycle movements and respond more effectively?
The only way you can predict in a highly volatile market, with the diversity also of consumer needs, wants rising, and as you know, society is becoming very individualistic, not even a family oriented. It's like each individual consuming on their own. The only way to manage is experimentation in the field. So you have to constantly experiment and constantly learn from the feedback. That's one mechanism. Second mechanism is, with the rise of social media, we have to become more a listening post. So how do you organize a company that is having a continuous listening from the marketplace? Because social media today really broadcasts much better than print media or television ever did. Word gets out, both positive and negative. So watching that and constantly adapting is the only way out. There is no other way one can manage in a highly volatile and highly diverse emerging consumer economy.
Prof, may I ask about social media?
Yes.
This is taking the world by storm,
Yes.
and many organizations embarking on it, perhaps some at the expense of traditional media.
Correct.
What's your take on this?
There is no question that social media will become a substitute for traditional media. Anything that's peripheral, when it becomes core medium becomes peripheral. Always the rule. So when we had the print media at one time, when television came, print became almost peripheral. Now social media is coming, which means television would be very specialized, very specific reasons you would use it, like big events, sports events, for example, the football, the World Cup or something like that. Social media will become more universal. So my view is that there's a clear substitution. And if you talk to packaged goods companies, they're already shifting the dollars they want to spend more and more on social media.
That's a very interesting comment you make about television being very specialized in media.
Right.
Yes, and with technology changing so rapidly, how should organizations manage this?
Very interestingly, back to, and I'll come to the technology, what we have seen is interesting. The biggest way to watch the print medium is highly specialized magazines. Used to be one general purpose magazine,
That's right.
Like a Look or a Time magazine, Life magazine. Today you see niche magazines taking over the market, very specialized, right?
That's right.
So that's clearly what's going to happen. Technology in companies is like breathing air. In marketing, it is much more strategic to understand, because the chief marketing officer is now having the budget. 40% of all the IT spending in a company is no longer with the chief information officer, but it is now with chief marketing officer, which means chief marketing officer has to be technically understand to recruit the right set of agencies which are in social media, to understand the power of social media for their own brand, not only brand patronage, but brand alteration.
Yes.
Consumers are going to take liberty with the brand,
Yes.
and therefore brand stewardships that we used to teach, making sure logo remains the same, etc., is no longer possible.
Right.
So how do you then make sure that your brand is not altered into the way consumer would like to express? Consumers are becoming co-creators now.
Yes.
Isn't that
That's right.
interesting?
Yes.
And they want to co-produce with you your product, by and
That's
large,
right.
your brand, your packaging. It's very fascinating.
Yes.
One additional thing related to that is that I think today what Frito-Lay has done, American football is a big event,
Yes.
and they are now asking consumers to produce commercials.
That's
It's
interesting.
very much crowdsourcing,
Yes.
and some of those commercials are world class
Yes.
because you may have 100 commercials out of which you can select two. An ad agency cannot make 100 commercials that you
Yes,
can choose
that's
two.
right. Yes.
So all of a sudden it's a very low cost, very imaginative, very creative way of getting consumers to do work for you.
Yes.
So consumers are your best marketers.
That's right, yes. With the advent of Web 4.0 right now, and over the years, it's really taking marketing to a higher level of standards. And it's something certainly many marketers cannot ignore altogether to be successful.
Totally
Yes.
right, yes.
Yes. With that in mind, Prof, can I ask you the next question, which is, what do you see as the biggest change in marketing over the years, and what future mega trends will derail current and predominant marketing concepts?
Yes. The marketing concept historically began with product. As you know, Peter Drucker, who I admire enormously,
Yes.
is probably one of the best management thinkers.
That's right.
And he had a very good write-up to say there are only two real functions in business, innovation and marketing.
Yes.
Interestingly, everything
Yes.
else doesn't matter.
That's right.
So we became very product-centric. Once you create a new invention, a product, then how do you package, how do you promote, how do you position become very strategic for us. Marketing added value to that product, which may be functionally very good, but now you add emotions.
Yes.
Automobile. You can have a Model T, black, very basic, but you can have very
Yes.
exciting automobiles you can make, right?
That's
So in
right.
addition to
Yes.
functional performance, you have an emotive bonding, which is what marketing does very well. Engineers add value in the product.
Yes.
Marketing adds value by associating the product with a celebrity, with a lifestyle, whatever it is. So marketing creates value by association.
That's right.
We have moved away from that. Marketing used to be promoted on a ingredient in a product.
Right.
Secret recipe of Coca-Cola or Tiger,
Yes.
beer here, for
Yes.
example. Tiger Bomb, definitely. I mean, I'm fond of Tiger Bomb, even today.
That's right. Yes.
Despite all the modern medications,
Yeah.
which is interesting. It has a
Certainly.
secret ingredient, you
That's
promote
right.
the ingredients.
Yes.
Then we began to promote actually the functional value of the product. What benefit does consumer have?
That's right.
The next major evolution in marketing is that does marketing serve a purpose in society
Right.
through consumption? Consumers are now looking for everything in their life a meaningful consumption.
That's right.
So what we call, and I'm working on that one, is purpose-driven marketing. How does your product serve a purpose above and beyond just consumption?
Right.
So what are you doing for the environment in the process? What are you doing, in fact, in terms of improving the sustainability in general?
Yes.
All those issues are becoming very relevant. It's called a purpose-driven marketing.
Purpose-driven marketing. Prof, can you share further on this purpose-driven marketing? How would Asian companies, for example, embark on this as a first step?
Yes. I think purpose-driven marketing is even more appropriate in the Asian culture because we are not as capitalistic as America is. America is what I would call raw capitalism, right?
Yes.
Very, like cowboy, capitalism essentially. We still believe in balancing the institutional well-being along with the individual
That's right.
pleasure and consumption.
Sure.
And given that balancing between institution and the individuals, whether the institution is a family, whether the institution is education, government, I think purpose-driven marketing becomes actually the DNA of the Asian culture.
Right. Sure.
It is in our DNA, except we have not linked it properly mentally, or does not have a planning process, a marketing planning process, where one embeds that purpose, and it will resonate with people much sooner in this country than it would have resonated in America.
This is a very interesting concept you have brought up, and can I ask if this applies to very small companies who are small setup?
In fact, in our research on this one, we have a book called The Forms of Endearment. Originally, it began by having, we fight for market share. Then we shifted to share of wallet, relationship marketing. And once that became a CRM, data analytics and all that, I told my colleague that the next major competitive advantage or a differential advantage will be share of heart. How do you win the share of heart of your customers? But then the book actually became more about the company, not about a product or a brand, called Forms of Endearment. And there we found that companies that are driven by passion and purpose financially outperform companies that are only shareholder driven. So if you are stakeholder driven, not only customer oriented, but employee oriented, supplier oriented, community oriented, you do better for your shareholders than being strictly shareholder driven, which is absolutely non-intuitive. That's where I learned that the best companies are small boutique companies who blend the purpose with marketing. So Patagonia, New Balance, they're all family-run businesses.
That's right.
And Singapore and Asia is all family-run businesses. So it's much easier because as a family, you know that you have to live in the community. A large corporation in a big city, where we live in a gated community, whereas some of the best purpose-driven companies are family-owned and their headquarters are in small towns.
I see.
Because in small towns, every Sunday church is a great equalizer.
Yes.
You are no longer the boss, there's a bigger boss than you,
Yes.
which is God,
Yes.
which is interesting. And your managers live next door to you. They're your neighbors. Their children play with your children. So you have this huge informal relationship with your employees that you would not have otherwise in a large metro city downtown. So I do believe that it really begins, this purpose-driven embedded purpose is much more in the smaller companies, and in fact they gain popularity because of that and become big businesses.
I see. That's very interesting comment and in fact insight into purpose-driven marketing companies. Yeah. Can I ask from here, what new age marketing trends will influence future marketing programs and cause a radical shift in the way marketing is applied in the industry?
Yes, there are three changes, most of them coming from technology. First one is that today what we have is a demand-driven procurement.
Yes.
If you take a traditional bookseller, the bookseller will order the books, anticipate the demand,
That's right.
will keep it in inventory either on the bookshelf or in a warehouse someplace. Today Amazon is just the opposite.
Yes.
They don't even stock anymore.
That's right.
It begins with order that comes in online.
That's
So online marketing is the biggest change in paradigm,
Yes.
reversing the whole flow
Yes.
where demand generates supply chain, not manufacturing, which is
That's
totally
right.
radically changing.
That's right.
It is very efficient, so Cisco systems, Dell computers. In B2B, all orders are now online,
That's right.
no paperwork.
Yes.
And therefore just-in-time becomes very important now, right?
That's right.
Fulfillment cycles get shorter and shorter and
Yes,
shorter.
yes.
There is no slack
Yes.
time. So that's clearly one major impact of technology.
That's right.
Second impact of same technology has been the going into the smartphones.
Smartphones.
And smartphones getting you into all these applications,
Yes.
including social media.
That's right.
So Facebook, Twitter, etc. are making a huge paradigm shift for marketing function, more so than any other function, which is interesting. So I believe that social media as a second component of technology is very powerful. The third component of technology is that technology begins to reduce the silos, which are functional silos or product silos or geographical silos. So today this technology makes an integrated enterprise.
Right.
So a chief marketing officer for product A in Singapore, another chief marketing officer for product B for the same company, Hong Kong, a third one based in London, wherever, they are now on a real-time communications.
How does that, sorry to interrupt you, Professor, how does that apply to the service industry?
Service industry, the use of technology is even more necessary. Because in service industry, you always have a co-production between the consumer and the producer.
Right.
And in co-production, technology enables much smoother, much easier way of doing things. Without technology, it is much more manual, inefficient, quality assurance. So you think about the hospitals, you think about the hotel, motel, hospitality industry, which are all services, airlines. Today, I do my own reservation.
Yes, that's right.
I pick up my own, boarding gate ticket,
Yes,
for
that's
example,
right.
right? I mean, everything is online where consumer is co-producer with you, right?
That's right.
In services, that's very important.
That's right.
Second reason it's very important is that services are perishable. That means you cannot store the capacity.
That's right.
And technology enables you to use that capacity you have at that point in time much more than a non-technology based organization. So it's much more important.
Yes. Can we now turn to China?
Sure.
And do you think that their current efforts to embrace marketing will make it equal to the US as a marketing leader of its brands?
I personally believe that China will not only equal in marketing and branding to America, which is the gold standard, but will surpass. And the reason is that China, like Japan, learned how to produce very price-sensitive products, low-cost, low-priced products, and is moving up to luxury.
Yes.
China is the largest luxury market in the world. It surpassed America.
Yes.
China is the largest e-commerce platform.
Yes.
It surpasses American e-commerce
Yes.
platforms.
That's right.
So I do believe that branding aspects the Chinese will learn from the rest of the world, German brands, American brands,
Yes.
etc., and actually improve on them more
Yes.
and make it even better. So I think it's a matter of time where we will admire the Chinese brands
Yes.
as we admire the Japanese brands and the Korean brands.
Yes. That's right.
Today Samsung, everybody respects, just like they do with Apple.
That's right.
Today Toyota is as respected, especially Lexus, the luxury brand, as any luxury brand in the world.
Yes.
I think the Chinese brands will come out the same way, one very value brands and luxury brands. But I personally believe that China will excel in luxury brands, opposite of what we think.
Right. And in your opinion, how long do you think it will take before we see such development and achievements from China?
Yes. I think the timing for China's evolution as a marketer of world-class brands is just at the tipping point. Very important thing that happened 20, 30 years ago roughly, is that China allowed foreign brands to be made in China.
That's right.
Therefore, they got the technical know-how, they got the raw materials to come to do the labor value add, whether it was in garments, for example, or whether it was in luggage, for example,
Yes.
or whether it was in any product category, such as automobiles. China, therefore, has learned how to make products.
Yes.
China is now learning what these Western brands were capable, taking a low-cost manufacturing base out of China and creating a huge value and a high price. So given that nature, value add can be done through branding and marketing. And my view is that Chinese are such smart businesses, even state enterprises, that they will make sure that they get additional value for the products that they have. So I'll give you some examples. In a B2B environment, business to business, Huawei Technologies is now much more admired by all Western telephone companies as they used to admire Alcatel, Lucent, Ericsson, Sony. Huawei today commands high respect. So they deliver something that is an absolutely superb, exceptional performance for wireless networks. China is very good in railroad buildings.
That's right.
People don't think so. In industrial markets, Chinese brands are already highly respected. Now come to the consumer side, where they are just gaining that momentum to create by putting more effort on the proper marketing side. So higher, which is in appliances, they will become like Electrolux, they'll become like Whirlpool, and automobile makers the same way. I mean, it's mind-boggling to see how much Chinese are now learning to really invest in branding and make it for value add much more for the products we make in China.
In recent years, there were some problems with the image of quality products.
Yes.
Do you think this will hamper their progress and their campaign to build strong brands?
No question that any time there is some sort of an adulteration of the product or the quality is not met, especially if it becomes a safety problem, like in the toys, for example, or in the dairy products or whatever it is, the market failure takes place, which means capitalistic model may not be the only approach, and therefore what you have to do is to create a regulatory process, a policy with which you simply say, we have inspection standards, quality standards, you have to meet. Why I'm talking about that one is rise of Chinese brands would be just like the rise of Japanese brands. So in Japan, which used to be also a cheap goods maker at one time, people used to laugh at made in Japan. Japanese government said, along with collaboration with the industry, that will create JETRO, J-E-T-R-O, which is the Japan export agency. You cannot sell your products abroad unless it meets minimum quality standards. And as you know, they hired Deming, who was a statistician, to understand what quality is all about, and they invest in quality by mandate. So my view is that by regulation, China will do the same thing, will actually not allow inferior goods to be made in China.
Right. Talking about Japan, they have been reputable for many products. In particular, we are most familiar with the electronic products. They have now decentralized many of the operations, including R&D or overseas centers, to be closer to the consumers and to the marketplace. In your opinion, do you think that will impact on the reputation of Japanese brands?
The answer is yes and no. Sony suffered from that as a Japanese brand when they tried to make products in Malaysia. It's not the assembly that you do in many of the consumer electronics, it is the component maker. If you just assemble and import components from Japan, it's okay, but they started buying locally, and there's no quality assurance in the upscaling supply function, which is the most critical one. So when consumers get a Sony radio or a Sony television, it says made in Malaysia, they always say this cannot be as good a quality as the same television with the same brand name made in Japan. And this happened with cameras, for example. This almost happened with the automobile side.
Yes.
What nice thing happened, therefore, is that if Japanese companies are serious about distributing their R&D, advanced country to advanced country works very well. So when the Japanese car makers went to America, they didn't have quality problem.
Yes.
Because America was already having quality assurances. Product safety laws, for example, emission control laws, all this stuff were put by regulation as well as by market process. So I think going to other advanced countries would be less difficult, but going to emerging economies, they have to learn how to manage supply function or create suppliers in emerging markets like China and India or South Africa who are world class.
On the same note, in your opinion, do you think that in time to come, if China have to do the same thing, will they achieve the same level of success as what the Japanese will have accomplished?
I'm absolutely convinced that China will also make the transition like Japan did from cheap goods to value to premium. I would say it's a matter of probably no more than 2 decades when we will have the same admiration of made in China as we now have made in Japan and even made in Korea.
Sure.
I must tell you, people were skeptical about Samsung, Hyundai automobile, failed the first time in the US, because they
Yes.
did not put the quality assurance seriously. But now Hyundai is a very popular car
That's
in
right.
America.
That's right.
It's very competitive market.
Yes.
So I think China can easily do it.
Yes. It's about 10 to 15 years ago where there were a lot of social stigma about buying Korean products in Singapore. But today, people don't hesitate to buy Korean products.
Exactly.
Thank you for that. Yeah. I have another question for you, Prof. Many companies have ignored the balance between making profits and being ethical. What's your take on this?
It's a no-brainer, as we call it. If you want to be a long-term sustainable company, only way to do business is ethical. Ethical in all 4 P's of marketing.
Yes.
Product, your product must be ethically created. Pricing must be ethically, proper transparency. Promotion, which is where we take a lot of liberties,
Right.
has to be the same. And your distribution channels, you must always have ethical distributors and ethical dealers. My view is that it's absolutely a necessary condition. In fact, all companies that have been unethical in their behavior in any of the 4 P's had a very short life. Market is unforgiving, and competition is relentless.
That's right.
And therefore, ethical way is the only way. And I will tell you why I'm passionate, because marketing is a very good, powerful force. Peter Drucker's comment that there are only 2 real functions of business, innovation and marketing. Society respects and admires innovation. Nations want to invest in innovation, but nobody respects marketing, because marketing is already associated with unethical behavior. So we have even a double duty because of the negative image. Anything that goes wrong, marketers did that. We blame marketing people always, So we have a double reason why we have to go ethical. It's just like made in Japan was a poor image, so they've gone out of their way to prove Japanese products can be world class. Same thing marketers have to say, we can be world class citizens. We can serve the society and make money at the same time. Or the old saying, doing well by doing good is more important in marketing than it is even in the business decision.
That's right. Taking further on this point here, many small and medium-sized enterprises in Singapore are basically more concerned about short-term gain, which is they're very sales and profit-driven, putting ethical considerations behind them, although they fully realize that that's important aspects of totality in business. What advice do you have for this kind of companies?
Yeah. The only way it makes a change in a company is to show huge financial cost of unethical behavior or huge competitive disadvantage. So one always uses those 2 to convince the senior most management that the cost of unethical behavior, society will punish you quite a lot. If market doesn't punish you, then there will be a regulator who will punish you. There will be a consumer advocate like Ralph Nader type. You will create. There's a very good saying by Peter Drucker again, who said that if you see the rise of consumerism in a society, it is the shame of marketing. Bad marketers create consumer advocates.
Yes.
And today with social media, it's very important, even for small enterprises, because they all have Facebooks, they all have Twitters now.
That's right.
It's very affordable. They're all in the cloud.
That's right.
And a small company can be as damaged as a big corporation today. There is no, they're all level playing field,
Yes.
It doesn't matter whether you're a small or a
Yes.
big. So given that, it's very critical.
Yes. That's very inspiring advice actually to a lot of SMEs, and something which they should seriously consider. Right. Can I move on to back to subject of branding again?
Yes.
And in fact, we're encountering more and more non-US companies in the top 100 most valuable global brands on the 2014 list. And what key lessons can we learn from a mix of non-US to US brands that are entering and exceeding the list, given the fact that more and more companies are investing in branding of products, services, and experiences?
I think generally inventors and entrepreneurs underestimate the power of marketing and branding. So one has to increase their awareness through either experimentation or through some clinical evidence by and large. Let me give you an analogy. Turkey as a nation decided that great domestic brands, and in prelude to becoming a part of European Union, where the biggest market will be Europeans and therefore French and Germans, they had to show that Turkish brands are world class. So the government actually created a brand assistance agency, and they would select so many brands which are world class but only domestic, and give them an executive MBA program to train their managers on branding. Hired a consultant, one of the best ones, Jack Trout, who along with Al Rees for the positioning, the Battle of Mind, they asked him to be a consultant, how to implement, action-oriented. And today, some of the Turkish brands are highly admired in the Western world. Singapore has a similar situation. There are some very good brands, but there is no scale because Singapore is a small town. What has Swiss done? Switzerland has done for their brands and watches. They only think global up front.
That's right.
So Singapore brands, if they think global as their arena to play, not just local, even though 80-90% of the business may be local, it's a global mindset, suddenly it changes everything. And I'm told, I know I love Tiger brand for balm, for headache remedy. Tiger beer, which is now partly owned by Heineken.
That's right.
They have told me that Tiger beer will become probably number 2 or number 3 brand in the world. Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
So somebody from abroad sees the value of your brand, and we don't see it, right? But there are quite a few good brands here. Singapore Airlines is a world brand.
Yes.
Many of your infrastructure companies, like Changi Airport, is a world brand in the whatever it is.
Yes.
Even I would say Singapore Seaport Authority is considered world class, like Rotterdam Seaport is the same way in their sphere of customers. But some little brands are more interesting. I don't have experience personally, but somebody told me that you have a good hospitality brand called Banyan Tree.
That's right. Yeah.
Much more, very boutique.
Yes.
Managing that, how do I serve the society while I make money, right?
Yes.
Purpose driven.
Yes.
So they give livelihood into places where they have created. It is already a very interesting brand, and I'm very curious to know more about them now.
Yes.
Then you have a brand, I was told, Bread Talk.
Bread Talk.
Interesting.
Yes.
I don't know much about that one, because I don't eat bread anymore, which is interesting. But Bread Talk has a great reputation.
That's right.
So if you have a good domestic brand reputation, especially from an advanced country, it has actually a global market opportunity. So in the old days, we used to say, globalization, think global, act global. Then we said, no, think global, act local, local. I have been now creating a whole new paradigm which says, think local, act global. That brand has an enormous value outside of the market in which you survived and succeeded. And that's what Singapore has to learn.
Yes. Singapore being a small country and basically making a lot of small businesses, how long and how much investment in terms of resources do you think these companies will need to really grow their brand?
I think it has to have, surprisingly in marketing, we have never thought of public-private partnership.
Yes.
As we do in infrastructure immediately. I think branding is a public-private partnership, which means government says, I have a vested interest in my native sons and their branding effort, and how can I invest in them and treat branding as an investment proposition for the nation, because the soft power of a nation comes through its brands. People admire a nation like Japan or Germany because they have world-class products. So it is in the nation's interest to invest in branding, especially for small and medium enterprises.
Sure, sure. Thank you, Professor Sheth, for your very insightful and very revolutionary comments and knowledge shared with us. We'd like to thank for the professor's time today, and we hope that the audience and viewers will learn much from this and take this out to practice and grow Singapore brand and your businesses so that you continue to establish place in the world. Thank you, Professor, for your time
Thank
today.
you, and thank you.
Thank you very much.